Ezekiah Oladipo Ogumade. His grandfather, Prince Ogumade of the Ogumade Royal House of Lagos, had been a witness to the ceremony at which King Josemo had ceded Lagos to the British in 1861. For this reason, he had a special attachment to issues concerning the political future of Lagos. Davis' education epitomized the problem that those concerned with the longevity of the empire had with the system of education in southern Nigeria. There was little that was beyond his intellect. Having shown an early gift in mathematics, he was appointed as an assistant master at the prestigious King's College to teach math. In 1925, he was the only student who passed in Nigeria, possibly in West Africa, the matriculation examination for admission to the University of London. He almost invariably finished first in the order of merit in examinations, from the higher civil service entrance examination to his first degree as a Bachelor of Commerce from the London School of Economics. So his second degree in law from the same university before gaining admission to the English bar in 1946, a gifted writer. After a period of work in the Secretariat of Northern Nigeria in Kaduna, from 1926 to 1930, he had first planned to pursue a career in journalism before later deciding to pursue a career in law. He was a pioneer in several of the institutions that were to play a key role in the independence struggle, including the trade union movement, the Lagos Youth Movement, later named the Nigerian Youth Movement. He was editor of the movement's newspaper, the Daily Service, and had a leading role with the Nigerian Morning Post and the Sunday Post. A Wesleyan, he served in the First Republic government from the 1960s to 1964 as Federal Minister of State in the Ministry of Industries. His commitment to the One Nigeria ideal was total and without reservation. All sectional ideology was anathema to him, whether it came from the Hausa Fulani, the Igbos, or his own Yoruba people, or indeed the British. He would entertain any form of rule, democratic, military, feudal, provided he stood any chance of preserving Nigeria as configured by Lugard. Let all who wish to destroy the unity of Nigeria realize that it is the common heritage of 32 million people. Our fathers throughout the country toiled and suffered together in those harsh pioneering days to build up Nigeria from a geographical expression. Citizens of Nigeria in the remote part of the country are today nourished by the sacrifice of our fathers who died toiling for Nigeria as one country. As co-messengers, laborers, etc., we therefore owe a duty to preserve such hard-won unity for generations yet unborn. Balak. While studying in London, he found aspiration for the one nation, one people, regardless of religious and linguistic differences, ideology in the philosophy of the Congress Party of India. In 1935, the Indian students in the college invited me to join them in welcoming Pandit Jawahar Nehru. The most exciting event of the day was Pandit Nehru's address, which held every listener spellbound. He told the audience that he had come direct from jail on his way to Switzerland to see his ailing wife. All good citizens in India were in jail, and no Indian worthy of his nationality was outside the jail. And he said, "Isn't India itself one large British jail? One thing is certain and incontrovertible. It is a question of time for India to become independent and be left alone to direct his own affairs according to his own will." That was what Pandit Nehru said that got H.O. Davis spellbound and wanted the same for Nigeria. His steadfast commitment to one Nigeria led him to become a useful ally of fellow travelers, especially in the articulation of policy. Many of the turnings in Nigeria's political journey were presaged by him, but with uncanny precision in several of his writings and speeches. For example, an article of his, Lagos Won't Be No Man's Land, in the Daily Times of 5th June 1956. Baba, the word Lagos is no man's land, or Lagos will never be no man's land. I might not be new to know. Since 1950s, it has actually occurred, probably for the first time in the publication. And this man who is promoting One Nigeria and was one of the 4 arrowhead that got Nigeria independence process started, he wrote something about Lagos won't be no man's land in the Daily Times of 5th of June 1956. He wrote, Lagos is not an unoccupied arid desert. It is the land of the Lagosians, most of whom have no other homes and who live in Lagos. If the present tendency to untouchy, they call it untouchy, in the regions continues, then the Lagosians will soon demand that another site be found elsewhere for the federal capital. Surely, there must be some spot far away from Lagos where the east, the west, and the north have common boundaries. It is there that these autonomous regions with residual powers should meet and jointly chant the chorus: East for Easterners, West for Westerners, North for Northerners, and the devil take the rest. 20 years later, in 1976, a decision to move the federal capital from Lagos to Abuja was taken and justified on the basis of Abuja's unique quality as a place where the East, the West, and the North have common boundaries. A significant number of other such prescient contributions suggest that H.O. Davis either had the ears of those in power or they had his ears. Either way, neither jail nor exile was ever his portion at any stage of his political career. Under his stewardship, the objective of the Nigerian youth movement was to be a truly national movement with a constructive nationalist agenda that would ordinarily have made all but the most ardent imperialists comfortable. The aim of the movement was the development of a united nation out of the conglomeration of the people who inhabit Nigeria. We will combat vigorously all such tendencies that will jeopardize the unifying process, he wrote. Obafemi Jeremiah Awolowo, born on 6th March 1909 in rural Ikene in Ijebu-Remo, Yoruba land. His family lineage had been wholly traditional until the arrival of the Christian faith in Ikene in 1906, when his father became one of the first converts. Notwithstanding his grandmother, who was the biggest influence on him, in his early years, remained an Ifa worshipper. The death of his father, a successful farmer and timber merchant, in 1920, when he was just 11 years old, saw him transformed from a young boy with a comfortable upbringing and with an assured educational future into an Oliver Twist-like character in the service of various masters in Abeokuta in desperate quest for a means to pay his way through school to fulfill his late father's ambition for him to become a teacher or a clerk. In the course of this shepherd period of my young life, I attended 4 schools, namely Ibara Anglican, Ogbe Wesleyan, Itesi Wesleyan, and Itesi Roman Catholic. In the same period, my cloth were reduced almost to tatters and rags. And there was a brief period when all I had for a decent apparel was a pair of shorts and a shirt. Awolowo wrote. This experience would have fed into his decision as premier of the Western region to introduce free education for all school children. Fiercely competitive in all things, he had excelled in wrestling and as a center forward in football in his youth. The passion for competition extended to academics and made him instinctively hostile to anything that might suggest an acceptance of a status of inferiority to any man, white or black. His virulent hostility to colonial rule meant that he could not bring himself to work for the colonial administration. Work as a journalist with the Nigerian Daily Times was only a means to an end. That end being a career in law. On the journey, he tried his hand at various commercial ventures, ranging from money lending, transportation, and cocoa trading, experiencing boom and bust along the way before the award of a contract to supply the army barracks in the West and in Kaduna with yam and yam flour finally enabled him to embark on his law studies in the UK. For Awolowo, the political unity of his Yoruba people was his first priority. While in London studying law, he copied Nnamdi Azikiwe's initiative in forming the Igbo Federal Union to establish the Yoruba Cultural Organization, Egbe Omo Oduduwa, which he then brought back to Nigeria on his return in 1948. Later, in 1951, he took the initiative of launching the first modern political party in Nigeria with the Action Group, complete with party manifestos and professional electoral campaigns. His philosophy for Nigeria was shaped by his one nation outlook for the Yoruba people. His commitment was to a united Nigeria rather than one Nigeria. And so he was implacably opposed to a unitary Nigeria. He was equally hostile to a federal arrangement which was unbalanced, whether because some of the federating units were much larger than others, or because the federating units were too small to effectively balance the power of the center. He insisted upon true federalism, with the federating units being organized on the basis of their ethnic identities or linguistic ties. Awolowo wrote, Nigeria is a country of various tribes, some of which have lived together in harmony for many years before the advent of the British. Some were unknown to one another in the past and were only brought together for the first time by the British administration. Some share similar customs, traditions, and culture, and are traceable to the same ethnic origin, while others differed from each other as aborigines of Australia from the Zulu of South Africa. In dividing Nigeria into regions, it is therefore necessary to group together only people who, through affinity or general experience, are known to be capable of working together harmoniously. The guiding principles in the division of the country into regions must therefore be ethnic classification, cultural affinity, common problems, and perhaps administrative convenience. This position was the polar opposite of the British outlook for post-colonial Nigeria. His thinking on the issue, coupled with his education and his dogged commitment to principle, made him the most feared and at the same time the most respected of the nationalists in British circles. he would end up in jail on charges of high treason. Anthony Eronsile Enahoro. Anthony Enahoro was the youngest and physically the smallest of the quartet. What he lacked in age and size, he made up in his preconsciousness, something like that. His grievance against British colonial rule was personal. He alone, amongst the quartet, was able to claim descent from a first-tier ruling family, the Benin royal family. In the course of the British conquest of Benin, his great-grandfather had been killed. His grandfather, Okoje, was captured by the British as a young man and exiled by them on no less than 3 occasions during his lifetime. Enahoro, upon the death of Overami, Okoje was returned from exile to resume the stool of his fathers, although he was to be exiled twice again to Benin and Ibadan before he died, full of years, in his own home in 1944. Now he was the current Onoje of Uromi, only recently returned from his last exile, an old man with the fire of rebellion still in his veins, never to be fully reconciled to British rule. The young Enahoro grew up on tales of his father, of his grandfather, Okoje. This great man, my boyhood hero and God, whom the wicked British had orphaned, captured after battle and exiled 3 times from his grandmother. He had made an early resolution to find a way to get even. His father's conversion to Catholicism did little to quench the fire of rebellion and vengeance which he had inherited. That fire was being unwittingly stoked on a daily basis as he fulfilled his duty of reading the newspapers to his mother while she went about her chores. Although born in Uromi, in Benin country, he had been raised in Owo, Yoruba land. From his infancy, before attending King's College in Lagos for his secondary education, his first language was, therefore, Yoruba. His father's plan was that he should study for the bar, and so he had him tutored to the highest level in English. But the rebel child had his own plans. On finishing at King's College, he decided to go into journalism as the shortest route to the career in politics, on which his mind was set. So, Enahoro wrote, perhaps in preparing me as a thought for college, Father had over-prepared me, and the additional 6 years at King's had made me a man before my time. So that I believed that I was fairly well equipped for adult life. Howbeit, while some of my colleagues dreamt of great careers at the bar and others had visions of themselves as brilliant surgeons, and others had already applied to enter the civil service with its security and better wage prospects, I saw myself as a crusader, setting wrongs right, denouncing injustice, changing the world, building a new life for our people. He joined Azikiwe's West African Pilot in 1943 before becoming editorial chair of his sister paper, the Southern Nigeria Defender. At the age of just 21, he was appointed editor of a leading publication, the Daily Comet, one of the ones he had been reading to his mother. As a young political activist, he found himself coming under the influence of the 3 older nationalists in different ways. He cut his teeth in journalism in Azikiwe's stables, while he received his early political influence from H.O. Davis as a member of one of the young circles which Davis organized. Initially impressed by Davis' One Nigeria philosophy, in the end, it was Awolowo's ethnic federalism that won him over. The combination of Awolowo and Enaoro would make the action group a formidable political force. Enaoro's battle with the British and later with the political order that the British left behind would see him repeatedly jailed for sedition before being forced into exile on 2 occasions after. His 1963 flight to Britain on a first round of exile, following charges of high treason, saw him detained in Brixton prison. The debate in the British Parliament over the Nigerian government's demand for his extradition not only filled the front pages of the British newspapers, it caused a permanent change in Britain's extradition laws. Such was the political storm that blew up over the extradition of this small yet extraordinary man that it led to the fall of the conservative government of the day, notwithstanding that the extradition request was only granted on the strict condition that the death penalty would not be imposed. Benjamin Nnamdi Azikiwe. On the individual life and experiences of the quartet before they entered national politics, Nnamdi Azikiwe was the hardest and the most moving. His story is an African tragedy of epic proportions. A man of great potential who set out to do the best for himself and for all Africans, but whose judgment calls at critical junctions led to disastrous consequences for his Igbo people. Azikiwe was an Igbo man who was born in Zungeru, Hausa land, on 16 November 1904. His father was a clerk in the West African Frontier Force, one of the educated Southerners on whose support the British administration of the North depended. As a result, Nnamdi Azikiwe was a Southerner who spent his childhood in the North. He was, to all intent and purposes, a Hausa boy, speaking that language very fluently. At the age of 8, his father sent him to their native Onitsha to learn the Igbo tongue. At the age of 10, he was moved again to Lagos, following his father's transfer there. Now, he was being raised as a Yoruba youth of the Lagosian kind. Now, this is what Nnamdi Azikiwe wrote himself. In Bamboshe streets, we also lived near the Akereles. John, the eldest of the popular contractor, was very kind. Up to that time, I had not met any boy who was such a humanitarian during my stay in Bamboshe Street. His 3 brothers, Alaba, Oni, and Abiola, were real Aguda products. I do not say this in derision, but I mean that they were the life of our neighborhood, and they made things hot for boys who were not strong enough to resist the affront and bullying pranks of other Aguda boys. Nnamdi Azikiwe wrote in his own memoir. His close friendship with a Yoruba youth in the neighborhood by the name of Francis Adedayo Alaba, an assistant head printer of the CMS Press in Lagos, implanted in him an early interest in the printing industry. I went so far as to tell him that with his knowledge of printing, we could start a newspaper. In Lagos, Azikiwe attended the Wesleyan Boys High School in Broad Street, Lagos. After a year, his father sent him back to Onitsha to be raised as a young Igbo man, continuing his education at CMS Central School there. By the time Azikiwe had finished the first stage of schooling, he had to support his mother. He had divorced his father after the latter took a second wife. So he took up an appointment at the school. At the age of 16, his father once again directed him to relocate to Calabar to enroll at the Hope Waddell Institute, there to resume his education. At the institute, he became exposed to the story of Liberia, then the only independent state in West Africa, from Liberians teaching there, and also from the writings of Marcus Garvey. The next stage of his educational odyssey, as directed by his father, was to return to the Wesleyan Boys High School in Lagos as a boarder. This eclectic socio-cultural upbringing extended to his religious exposure as well. So, Azikiwe wrote, as a Christian, I have been many-sided denominationally due to chance and circumstance. At the tender age of 9, I was a Catholic. At 10, I became an Anglican. At 12, I was a Methodist. At 16, I became a Presbyterian. At 18, I was a soldier of the Lord, hallelujah, in the Salvation Army. At 19, I left the emotional for the intellectual side of Christianity and became a student Bible expositor, now known as a Jehovah's Witness. At 21, I entered the Baptist fold. At 25, I was reaffirmed in the Presbyterian faith. Whilst attending service at Tinubu Methodist Church during his second stint at Wesleyan Boys High School, he became exposed to the teachings of Reverend Dr. James Emmanuel Kwegri Agre, a book which Agre gave him, Negro Education, a study of the private and higher school for colored people in the United States, now directed his ambition towards America. Another book, From Log Cabin to the White House, a biography of President James Garfield, which was conferred on him as a prize by the school, now became the roadmap for his life and convinced him that he had to go to America. A speculative letter sent to the principal of Howard University in America earned him an introduction to Storer College and a promise of support with admission to the college, provided he could pay his way to America. Since his father had declared that he was unable to provide any financial assistance, he went to work as a clerk in the Treasury Department of the Colonial Service to raise some money for his adventure. His first attempt to leave Nigeria for America via Liverpool as a stowaway found him ending up only in Accra, where, to keep body and soul together, he joined the Ghana police force. He was not long there before his mother tracked him down to deliver his father's plea for him to leave the job and return to Nigeria, with a promise that he would help fund his journey to America. His father had become converted to his cause after a racial insult from a young colonial officer colleague had made the older Azikiwe realize the limitations of his own position as a civil servant. The incident, having affected the older Azikiwe's health and pushed him into taking early retirement from the service, he now handed over 300 pounds from his life savings with his blessings to his young Azikiwe to go to America in pursuit of education and success. Azikiwe left Nigeria in 1925 to enroll at Storer College. There, living the Black American experience, he became immersed in the story of the slave trade, abolition, the American Civil War, and the civil rights struggle. At college, he excelled in his studies and in sports as a pentathlete, a boxer. However, soon after completing his studies at Storer, in June 1927, he found himself unemployed. On the edge of starvation and attempting suicide on a train line. Azikiwe wrote, 4 weeks had passed since I lost my job, and no new job was in sight. By now, I was worth 1 dime in all the world. I had rationed my funds so frugally that I went on a diet for a long time, and at times had 1 meal a day. When no job was coming, I reduced this to a cup of coffee and 2 thick slices of bread, but it was in vain. By this act, he had given notice that he had no use for his life. He was rescued from the path of the train at the last minute, by a passerby who took him to the Pittsburgh YMCA. There, he came under the influence of Reverend Dr. A.M. Lamb, a white Presbyterian minister. Placing his aged hand on my head, he said to me, "It is the unseen hand of providence that saved you early this morning and brought me here, my son." In America, Azikiwe did every low job imaginable to pay his way, including sweeping, dishwashing, coal mining, and working as a road laborer and lift operator in between repeated bouts of unemployment. Despite all his hard work, he had to leave Howard University with his studies unfinished.